There are too many IEMs to choose from, and there seems to be something for any taste in sound signature, size, build, accessories, and in every price category you could reasonably imagine. The Moondrop Starfield is a popular IEM that has been around for a few years. Its warm, natural sound signature is beloved by many audiophiles. Its build and price are quite respectable. Recently, Moondrop released the Aria. This is an $80 IEM. Apos Audio sent me the Aria for review. Apos and I have a continuing relationship. They let me borrow gear from time to time, and I provide links to their website for the products they loaned to me. If you're tired of Amazon, eBay, and other retailers, consider Apos Audio. They have excellent customer service and competitive prices, and they are authorized dealers for all of their gear. Is the Moondrop Aria a smash hit like the Starfield, or just another IEM mixed into the busy IEM market? Moondrop says that the Aria is tuned to the Harman curve. If you've never heard or researched this tuning, then you should brush up to speed. In a nutshell, the Harman curve is the average of preferred tunings based on a study conducted of various individuals. The Harman curve is theoretically the best middle ground among all the most preferred sound signatures that were tested. The Aria's diaphragm is made of plastic. Moondrop says this results in reproducing frequencies up to and beyond 35 kHz, though you simply will not be able to hear that. I am rather pleasantly surprised to finally find a manufacturer that presents clear, more or less precise explanation of the sound signature that we should expect. Moondrop says that the Aria will provide a punchy bass, recessed mids, and sparkling treble. Moondrop also says that the Aria is optimized for modern recordings. The Aria is one of the best-built IEMs I have ever seen at any price range up to $1,200. Companies like Assel & Kern, when they collaborate with IEM manufacturers, do not consistently provide metal construction, even when their products cost several hundreds of dollars. The Aria feels heavy as the Starfield. The entire casing is made of 2 pieces of CNC metal. The color scheme of black undertone with a gold accent is both eye-catching and not particularly gaudy. The Aria is about the same dimensions as the Starfield. However, both IEMs have different casing designs. The Starfield has indents and curves where the Aria does not. Both IEMs seem to use the same ear tips. The Aria comes with a healthy selection of ear tips, though none are memory foam. The Aria uses a 2-pin cable, the same type as the one used with the Starfield. However, there is a huge difference between the Aria's cable and the Starfield's cable. The Starfield is about $30 more expensive, yet its cable is covered in a plastic sheath. There's nothing actually wrong with this cable, but when compared to the Aria's cable, the Starfield's cable looks dated and a little cheap. The Aria's cable has a cloth sheath and looser braiding. This results in the Aria's cable being a bit more pliable and softer than the Starfield's cable. The Aria comes with a compact carrying case. This case seems well constructed and has a textured coating. It's large enough for the IEM, cable, and spare ear tips, though it's kind of a stuffed-in fit. Speaking of fit, let's talk about fit and comfort. First of all, I have to say that the Starfield is not particularly comfortable for me. Its heavy weight causes the IEM to lose grip in my ear canal. The Aria has a slightly different design, and it sits within my ear much more securely. I can wear the Aria for 3 hours at a time without fatigue. Overall, the Aria is a surprisingly well-built IEM. Thus far, the gold standard for good metal construction has been the affordable Tin Hi-Fi T2. The T2 is still king of good build quality, particularly for its price, but the Aria looks and feels sturdier. The included accessories are plentiful, agreeable, and suited to the Aria. I am rather impressed with the quality cable included with this IEM, particularly since it puts the Starfield's cable to shame. I paired the Aria with numerous devices during my testing period. I listened to my Shit Modi and Liquid Spark stack, which is a neutral setup. I also listened to my RME 80i2 DAC, FIO M15, and FIO M3 Pro. I used a stock cable and ear tips. I played music from Amazon Music HD. None of my devices struggled to drive the Aria. Indeed, even the fairly cheap M3 Pro had plenty of power to spare for the Aria. Moondrop says that the Aria has punchy bass. Their frequency response graph suggests elevated bass. In my experience, I would say that the Aria has a noticeable sub-bass and mid-bass emphasis, with melding between those ranges. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, the Aria presented the sub-bass rumble from the beginning of the track. This detail was louder than I've heard on neutral headphones such as the Olo S4X. The reverberation was slightly longer than on the S4X as well. When the crescendo hit at the middle of the song, the organ melded with the other instruments and the rolling thunder effect was quite prevalent, louder than the other elements. All instruments tended to blend together, but nothing sounded distorted or muffled. When the vocals chimed in at the end, they rose from the background until they were about shoulder to shoulder with the instruments. In Conquered by Overwork, the Aria recreated the rolling marble effect at the beginning of the song. This detail is supposed to pan from right to left to center. However, the Aria kept it dead center. There are multiple drums in this track and the Aria presented all of them. However, the drums tended to blend together and I never heard clear separation among them. The drum strikes were sharp, but not ear-piercing. The drums were clearly louder than the other elements in the track. I listened to several hip-hop songs including Pure Water, Reel It In, You Patek, and Uproar. On each occasion, the Aria presented full sub-bass. Mid-bass and sub-bass tended to meld, but there was no mistaking that the bass was present. It sounded almost like the subwoofer was only 10 feet away from me in a medium-sized room. The vocals were about one step ahead of the instruments and retained their requisite sparkle. I listened to Bim Bam Smash for the Bourne Supremacy soundtrack. This song contains numerous drums of various sizes. The Aria presented all of them, but none was clearer than any other. They all tended to meld together. At 1 minute and 15 seconds, there is a pause and a hard drum strike timed to car slamming into each other. The Aria presented that drum strike with powerful emphasis. At low to medium volume, this drum sounded a bit blunted. However, at higher volume, the sharp, visceral impact of the drum was clearly and unmistakably audible. Overall, the Aria has a boosted bass response. Sub-bass is above neutral and I would hazard a guess by several decibels. Mid-bass is also elevated a bit more than the sub-bass. Both frequencies tend to meld, resulting in a warm bass response. Reverberation is slightly longer than on neutral headphones, such as the Olo S4X. Moondrop says that the Aria has recessed mids. I think this is fairly accurate, but the mids are clear and full sounding. In Why Am I Like This by Orla Gartland, there is natural grain and sibilance mixed into the track. The Aria recreated both details. The grain seemed close to neutral, but the sibilance was just a hint above neutral. However, Orla's voice was one step behind the bass and the drums always outshined her voice. The instruments seemed to have correct timbre. When the backup vocalist started singing at the end of the song, her voice sounded distant in the right ear tip. Indeed, although the backup vocalist was audible, she was not particularly clear or detailed. In Want You Back by Haim, the Aria did very slightly accentuate the sibilance in the primary vocalist's voice. At 8 seconds into the track, the primary singer says the word "we" and drags it out, making it sound gravelly. The Aria didn't quite make this detail clear, and the gravelly nature was not particularly obvious. The two backup vocalists, when they first appeared, seemed clear and distinct. However, when the instruments played at maximum, all three vocalists melded together. I could just barely make out their individual tonalities, but that took some concentration. The drums, piano, guitar, bass all had correct timbre. The drums were a bit louder than the other instruments. In Superposition by Young the Giant, the Aria accurately recreated the ukulele, but the drums and bass were a bit elevated. All instruments appeared to be on timbre. The primary male vocalist sounded smooth and clear. His sibilance was not elevated and may actually have been a bit rolled off. There is a backup vocalist in this track and his voice is layered underneath the primary singers. However, the Aria was not able to present this subtle detail. Between 1 minute and 10 and 1 minute and 20 seconds, there are supposed to be sharp intakes of breaths. The Aria did present this detail, but it seemed a bit muffled. I listened to several songs by the American folk singer Guy Clark. Guy had a rough, gravelly Marlboro Man type voice. He used several acoustic guitars in a lot of his songs. I listened to Hemingway's Whiskey, The Last Gunfighter Ballad, and Randall Life. Guy's voice sounded fairly smooth and lacked some of the gruffness that I can hear on neutral headphones. However, his voice always sounded full and had plenty of bass in it. The guitars were full and clear, though all tended to meld a little bit together. Guy's voice was always intimate, close to my ears. Overall, the Aria does tend to have a recessed mids. However, vocals are not drowned out. Instead, vocals are one step behind the bass. Multiple vocals tend to meld together, though are not muddy or veiled. Instruments sound full, but some details are not quite audible. Moondrop says that the Aria has treble that sparkles. This is a little vague. In my opinion, the Aria has a slightly elevated treble, but with a higher treble region that is a bit rolled off and smoother. In Scherzo for X-Wings, the Aria clearly presented the brass and horns. These instruments sounded correct, but might have had just a hint more energy than on neutral headphones like the Avantone Planar. I could hear group sets, but did not hear individual instruments. None of the instruments sounded harsh or peaky even at beyond safe volumes. The Aria presented some width but no depth of verticality. In other words, some instruments seemed a bit further into the wings, but none seemed in front or behind, above or below. I listened to Flight from the City. The Aria made the piano sound as if it was about 5 feet away. The bassier notes were a bit emphasized, but not muddy or distorted or boomy. The electric buzzing and pops and sizzles were audible but not particularly clear. The cello was smooth and melded with the piano. I could hear the creaking of wood on the pianist's bench and the shifting of the cello's weight. Finally, I listened to Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet. The Aria presented the piano in the right, the drum kit in the left, the saxophone center, and the bass just behind these other instruments. All instruments tended to meld together, but this did not cause distortion, muddiness, or a veiled signature. The saxophone tended to have just a tiny bit more energy than on the neutral Avantone Planar. However, the saxophone was not harsh or piercing. The drums were one step behind the saxophone. Each strike of the cymbal sounded very similar to every other, even when the cymbals were struck at different speeds and angles. Overall, the Aria may have a slight emphasis in lower or mid treble, but has a clear roll-off in the higher treble region. No treble instrument ever sounded harsh, even at very loud volumes. The treble response was more or less smooth and never piercing. It is safe to say that the Aria is not a detailed IEM. This product provides obvious details and sometimes, once in a while, subtle ones. Some details are smoothed over, some are a bit recessed, and some are lost in the mix. Pops and sizzles and electric buzzing that is recorded into the bass layer of a track will get pushed into the background. These will be audible but not necessarily clear. Creaking of wood, shifting of the cello, sharp intakes of breaths, plucking of guitar strings, and other obvious details will be easy to find. For a more quantitative test, I used the song New Light by Kazuki. This track has layers of details, including the sound of children playing, wind, rustling of grass, piano, synth, and footsteps. I count the number of footsteps I can hear in the first 60 seconds. The Blonde BL03 presents 5 to 6 footsteps. The Tin Hi-Fi T2 presents 7 to 8 footsteps. The T2 Plus and the Blonde BL05S present 6 to 7 footsteps. The Heidi's MS2 presents 8 to 9 footsteps. The Moondrop Starfield presents 6 footsteps. The Aria presents 7 footsteps. The Aria's performance in this test was consistent with what I heard in the rest of the testing period. The Aria's boosted bass tends to make mid-centric details less audible. Some details are crisp, while others are very difficult to ascertain. One thing I will note is that the Aria was ever so slightly clearer than the Starfield in the New Light test. There is nothing exceptional about the Aria soundstage. However, there is also nothing worrying either. The Tin Hi-Fi T2, I believe, has above average soundstage. The Heidi's MS2 is similar to the T2 in this regard. The Blonde BL03 and BL05S are average at best and perhaps slightly below average in soundstage. The Starfield and Aria share approximately the same soundstage, and I would say these are about average. The Aria does not present any depth or verticality, but does show some width. The Aria will not create a 3D effect. The Harman curve is its own sound signature. If I were to break this down, I would say that Harman-tuned products tend to have elevated bass. The bass is typically not clear, but also not bloated. Mids usually are recessed, and treble sometimes can be pushed forward, a bit aggressive. This is not the same V-shaped sound signature that you might find in non-Harman tuned products. Instead, in my experience, the bass and mids get the most coloration one way or another. The Aria is clearly tuned for the Harman target. The bass is elevated. Both sub-bass and mid-bass receive a noticeable bump above neutral. Mid-bass is more elevated. Sub-bass and mid-bass tend to meld, creating a thick or powerful sound. This also results in a lack of bass detail. The mids are recessed. However, this is not so significant as to make vocals in mid-centric instruments sound distant. Indeed, I would say that the mids are 1 or 2 steps behind the bass, typically speaking. Vocals are less loud than drums in a mix, but voices are easily audible. Multiple vocalists blend together, particularly when instruments play at maximum, but I would not say that their voices sound veiled. The lower or mid treble is a bit elevated. However, higher treble is rolled off. This presents some additional energy to treble-centric instruments without causing fatigue or harshness. The Aria is about average in detail retrieval. Its boosted bass response results in some details being lost, others less clear, and some obvious. The Soundstage is also about average, hardly different from that of the Starfield. Overall, the Aria has a warm sound signature. It is not necessarily smooth. In fact, I would say that the Ibasso IT00 is a smoother sounding IEM. However, the Aria does not have an aggressive mid or treble range either. The Aria is, if I had to put it in very short phrases, a bassy IEM with intimate yet recessed vocals and slightly energetic treble. This IEM does nothing brilliantly well. It does not excel at detail retrieval, clarity, soundstage resolution, and is obviously not neutral in the traditional sense. However, the Aria may be a very pleasant sounding IEM. I imagine that bassy tracks may sound exhausting on the Aria, and those who prefer clear, upfront vocals may be less than enthusiastic with the Aria's performance. I decided to compare the Aria to several IEMs. I paired the Aria against the Starfield, Ibasso IT00, and the Final Audio B2. I used the stock cables and ear tips on all of these IEMs. I used my passive AB switch connected to my Army ADI2 DAC and on my Liquid Spark Modi stack. I played my test playlist from Amazon Music HD. I tried to volume match to the best of my ability. The following is mere summary of my findings. If you want detailed information about the competitor IEMs, please watch the reviews I made for those products. The Aria and Starfield are very similar sounding IEMs. I had to listen repeatedly back and forth to notice material differences. It appears that the Aria is overall slightly clearer than the Starfield. Sub-bass response seems to be very close indeed, with perhaps the Aria ever so slightly greater in sub-bass emphasis. Mid-bass impact appears to be similar as well. However, I would say that the Aria has marginally sharper and clearer bass impact. There is a difference in mid's response. The Starfield has slightly greater emphasis in sibilants and vocal grain. The Aria, by contrast, has closer to neutral presentation of sibilants and less obvious vocal grain, but this is by very, very minor degrees. The timbre of mid-centric instruments appear to be identical. Vocals on both IEMs are recessed, and I think are presented similarly. There is also a slight difference in treble response. The Aria is a bit clearer and has slightly more instrument separation than the Starfield. Both IEMs seem to have nearly identical treble push, and the energy of instruments is very hard to distinguish between these IEMs. However, I got the impression that the Aria adds a bit more treble energy than the Starfield. The Aria has slightly wider soundstage, marginally clearer and greater detail retrieval, and a bit more object placement than the Starfield. The IT00 has slightly greater sub-bass emphasis than the Aria. Bass decay is a bit longer on the Aria, however. Mid-bass slam is harder and sharper on the IT00. Decay, again, is longer on the Aria. The IT00 has marginally clearer sub-bass and mid-bass separation. The IT00 has smoother rendition of the mids, particularly vocals. The IT00 recreates vocal sibilants and grain, but neither is accentuated or sharp. The Aria, in contrast, has slightly more obvious sibilants and vocal grain. The IT00 has more intimate vocals and overall presents mid-centric instruments closer to the ears than the Aria does. Indeed, all vocals and instruments sound a few steps further away from the ears on the Aria. All instruments appear to have correct timbre on both IEMs. The IT00 has slightly smoother treble than the Aria. Both IEMs exhibit energy for treble instruments, but the IT00 has a softer, less sharp presentation. This was not a huge deviation and was only discernible upon close A/B examination. The Aria has wider soundstage than the IT00 and slightly greater separation of instruments. The IT00, funny enough, seems to be a bit warmer sounding, particularly for mid-centric music. It has a little bit more intimate presentation than the Aria. The IT00 and Aria have similar detail retrieval. The final audio B2 has less sub-bass and frankly a marginal roll-off in that region. The transients is faster on the B2. Mid-bass impact is harder on the Aria. Sub-bass and mid-bass separation is greater on the B2, and the Aria tends to meld those regions together a bit more. The B2 has smoother presentation of the mids, and it smooths out vocal grain and has a little less sibilance than the Aria. Vocals appear a bit more intimate on the B2. All mid-centric instruments appear to have the same timbre. The Aria has recessed mids compared to the B2. The B2 has forward mids, which are just slightly ahead of the bass. Treble on the B2 is more relaxed than on the Aria. Indeed, I would say that the B2 has a roll-off, though it is not significant. Treble instruments have more clarity and separation on the Aria. Detail retrieval is comparable and fairly similar. The Aria has slightly wider soundstage and more clarity. Overall, it is patently obvious to me that the Aria and Starfield are very similar sounding IEMs. There are a few key differences, but they are not eye-popping. I think close, meticulous testing back and forth will reveal differences, but not many. The Aria, however, does have a noticeably different sound signature when compared to the final audio B2 and Ibasso IT00. The Moondrop Starfield has been a popular IEM for quite a while. I imagine that Moondrop has sold a lot of them, and I can see the good reason why. The Starfield is well built, is fairly priced, and has a sound signature that will likely please a lot of people, audiophiles or not. At least in the United States, Moondrop does not seem to flood the market with a new IEM every month, so when this company releases a product, it's worth taking a close look at. The Aria is surprisingly well thought out. It has excellent build, good accessories, and a similar sound signature to that of the Starfield, and it's cheaper than the Starfield. When I listen to and consider the Aria, I see a competent IEM that does not break any new ground. It does not come with jaw-dropping accessories. It does not have amazing performance. It does not have a new and untested sound signature. But what Moondrop did with the Aria is praiseworthy. You see, it would have been easy for Moondrop to release a cheaper IEM but skimp on the design. They could have used plastic, which many IEM manufacturers, including some really expensive brands, do end up using. Moondrop could have reused accessories from the Starfield to save new sourcing and manufacturing costs. They could have thrown in a cheap carrying pouch or nothing at all, rather than a solidly designed case. Instead, Moondrop took a different approach. With the Aria, you get some of the best accessories I've seen in this price range, an agreeable design, and robust construction. This brings us to value. Yes, without doubt, the Aria is value. At $80, this IEM easily justifies its cost. I was skeptical before I opened the box, but upon first inspection, I realized that the Aria is not a cash grab product. Instead, in my view, it is a product dedicated to Moondrop's fans. The Aria sound signature is hard to distinguish from that of the Starfield. That may be a good thing for some and a disappointing fact for others. Those who are inclined towards the warmer sound profile of the Starfield, but did not want to spend over $100 on that IEM or did not like the design of that IEM, can now look at the Aria as the direct alternative. Those who already had the Starfield may be unimpressed with the Aria sound. You may have wanted a new sound signature altogether, but that's not what we get on the Aria. Or, in the alternative, perhaps you never liked the Starfield sound and see the Aria as wasted potential. The point is that everybody is different. Just because some people like a particular product is not reason to buy it. You have to be cognizant of your own preferences and budget. In my opinion, the Aria is what the Starfield should have been all along. I was never a fan of the Starfield's overall design. Its big, bulky housing never quite fit in my ears. Its cable felt a bit too janky. Its color design was a bit too gaudy. And I always thought that Moondrop was skimping on accessories for the Starfield. But the Aria rectifies those issues for me. For about $30 cheaper, you get redesigned appearance, better accessories, but a very similar sound signature. This puts people in quite a weird position. Typically, companies will purposefully handicap cheaper products to force customers to buy the more expensive offerings. But the Aria actually looks and feels like the more expensive product between it and the Starfield. In my opinion, based upon my experiences, I think it would be hard to justify purchasing the Starfield in light of the Aria. Assuming this is the sound signature you want, the Aria is hands down better value than the Starfield. I am surprised and quite pleased to see a company actually give something more for less. I hope Moondrop can continue this trend. Yes, I think the Moondrop Aria is definitely worth consideration.